Mr. Lynch?
Going very well, thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me in your home. I really
Hey, I'm
appreciate it.
glad that you are here because we really haven't had much of an opportunity to talk much over the years. So, but I've known you for a long time when you worked at the school right along with me.
Yeah, I used to try and sneak away and sneak in some conversations.
A little extra basketball.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
So you caught my interest really because your uh what's the word? Your faith. Your how much how much you believed in your faith,
Okay.
you know. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk with you. How long have you worked on the reservation?
I came here in October of 2013. So I've been here a little bit. I guess that puts me at around 8 years, and I've enjoyed it. I I can't think of anything I could have done better offhand. For those 8 years, I think I've grown a lot professionally because I had been out of teaching for a while, and so it's all good. I'm very happy with my years here.
Okay.
I did go to Grand Canyon. It was called college then, back in the late 70s and 80,
Uh-huh.
part of the 80s. And so I got to become familiar with Arizona. But as far as living on the actual Navajo Nation, it's been just since 2013.
Gotcha. Sweet. And then where are you from originally?
Yeah, so originally, born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my dad was a salesman, so lived also in Ohio.
So, excuse me. So you were born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yes,
Wow. And then you grew up, spent most of your adult life in Ohio.
yes.
That's awesome.
Right.
You said you were an avid baseball fan, right? Back in the day.
Well, I'll tell you what, back in the day when uh, when I left Indiana, we lived for a while in Indianapolis, and then we came to Ohio, and I lived in the suburbs of a town called Milford, right it's actually part of Greater Cincinnati, and we played baseball. I mean, that's what the kids did back then. If you're talking, this was in the 60s, and the kids would come from all around the neighborhood and have baseball games. So that's my experience with baseball.
Yeah.
My real sport is tennis, but baseball was big when I was like 9 years old.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that. I think that's like one of the more prominent stories I had, is you talked about like the kids coming together. And that's something I really miss, and something we don't see in today's generation is the willingness to go, get your friends together, get on the street and just play.
Yeah.
Everybody's so confined. Well, not right now. You kind of understand it just because of the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, it was hard for kids to come together. It seemed like they didn't want to go collect their friends and have a pickup game or something.
Right.
But yeah, so like
It
that's
doesn't happen much these days.
nah.
No. I mean, and they took it seriously back then. I
Oh
mean,
heck yeah.
hey, you better get a hit. If you don't, I mean, I was threatened with a Coke bottle one day that he would smash it over my head, and if I didn't get a hit. So, I mean, it got pretty serious at times. And I think he was kidding. I don't think he was really going to do it.
Well,
At least I'm still here today. So,
gotcha.
all right.
All right. So one of the things, or actually the main thing that caught my interest when I started this project, and I've always had you in mind to sit down and talk with you, is because it was your strong faith in Christianity.
Yes.
Okay, strong faith in Christianity. All the conversations we've had have always either revolved around religion and tradition or politics, and then there was sports sprinkled here and there, but those are one of the main things we talked about, right?
Sure.
Um, I think uh, for me, religiously and traditionally speaking, I've I feel like I've always been in limbo. I've always been in this area of belief and non-belief,
Hmm.
and really it was because well, I want to say because in high school I questioned everything, and I did a lot of reading, so I had this belief in everything was science based, and back then I didn't believe that the Bible uh, had any correlation to science, which is why I just completely um, ignore the Bible. And then I even had my own clashes with my family because they're heavily traditional. And so I used to put it back at them, telling them that I don't believe it. And so I actually, at one point in my life, called myself an atheist. I had no belief. I thought there was no any kind of divine, creation or creator. And for with Christianity, I think uh, it might have been the people I went to school with who were Christians, or people that I knew at the time, even into college. Those people who happened to be Christians, I didn't get along with them typically because I felt like they were too pushy or they put it in your face and things like that. I just didn't get along with that mentality, and that kind of ruined it for me. I read through the Bible in high school really quick just so I could read and I could talk about it. I wasn't one to talk about something I knew nothing about. So when I would debunk Christianity or things like that, is I could reference the Bible myself. Then again, I haven't read it since high school. But it's on the opposite end with traditional traditional teachings. For me, I used to go back and forth with my family, traditionally speaking, because um, I didn't believe in um, the teachings. I didn't. It just seemed made up to me. It just seemed like it. Uh, you know, I don't know. I couldn't
Let me
commit.
ask you this real quick. Was okay, traditional on what side, and the other side was what? You said that, and but I mean, one side of your family was like a traditional Navajo beliefs, right?
No, my entire family is
Oh,
traditionally
okay, both
speaking.
sides. Okay,
Yeah, and then
all
so the
right.
reason why I couldn't even like try to convert to Christianity is I just didn't get along with the people, and I felt like there wasn't enough evidence behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, going back to traditionally speaking, like I said, I was a heavy believer in science. I still am. I still use science and statistics, logic, fact. I think I follow that. And one of the things I remember a conversation with my family, even though they're very traditional, and I understand that peyote meetings aren't Navajo. They didn't originate with the Navajo tribe. These peyote meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the main topics I discussed with my family. I told them that I didn't think that peyote meetings were legitimate because I took three factors into account into making my decision. And it was to I don't want to say to the white man or to modern modern society's definition. Peyote is a hallucinogen. It's a drug. It's a
Yes.
heavy hallucinogen. You're mixing that with a lack of sleep because peyote meetings take all night.
Oh.
And so you mix a heavy hallucinogen with a lack of sleep. And before these peyote meetings, have um, you have a mindset going into them. You either have a problem or you're preparing for something. For example, my family has a tradition, like it's a tradition of ours to have a peyote meeting once you graduate, and I had one. Um, and keep in mind, I me right now, I respect Christianity and I respect people with traditional values. I still consider myself in limbo, but I do lean more towards traditional values. Um, what was I saying? Lack of sleep, heavy hallucinogen,
Mm-hmm.
and then going into these peyote meetings, you have a mindset. You're gonna think heavily about whether it's what you're gonna do after high school. In my case, if you had a problem with like alcoholism or certain things, what people go to these peyote meetings for, or just to reconnect or help somebody. You go into these with a mindset. So when you mix that lack of sleep with a heavy hallucinogen and your subconscious stressing over something, you're gonna freak out over, and you're gonna see things, especially related to that topic, and then in an idea you would walk out with a clearer mind. That's what I had.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mindset I had in high school. Um, to me now, I I have a genuine respect for people who believe in Christianity. I don't talk down on them, and I don't talk down on their beliefs. And the same thing with tradition, like the traditional values of my family. My family still practices certain traditional Navajo ceremonies, and a certain portion of my family they do practice peyote meetings. I won't personally participate as far as like sitting in and like preparing or participating in general, but I will help prepare out of respect for my family, just to not be that guy who sits around.
Mhm.
I will help my family, set up these events. And
Yes.
when they ask me to participate, I tell them I feel like it's more disrespectful for me to participate than to not participate, because my idea is, if I'm going to commit to something like these traditional values, I better uh, I was taught, partly by my coaches and certain individuals in my life, that if you're going to commit to something, you commit 100%.
Mhm.
And it would be fake for me to practice these things wholeheartedly
Mhm.
and say that I'm traditional, and then go about and, not commit to certain things that traditional values still hold.
I think that's admirable to a certain extent. I can't help but think of people that I've talked to, and they've told me that they, like for an example, I had the conversation with one other teacher, and I would share Bible verses with her. But I think I really feel she was very nervous about other people knowing that she was looking into the scriptures. And but so when you tell me your story about not wanting to participate in these ceremonies, should we call it? Or
Yeah.
um, that's a stand you had to take. You might have got some criticism for that.
Mm, yeah, like I said, it wasn't really much criticism. Like I said, I still help my family prepare these things,
Okay.
just out of respect.
Yes.
I won't, eat peyote when I even from my meeting when I was in high school. Peyote's passed around, and certain things happen. I can't talk about it. It's something that has to be discussed inside
Mm-hmm.
whatever structure it happens in. And when it came to my turn to participate in these things, I already talked with the people prior that I wasn't gonna intake anything, so I just kind of blessed myself and with touching it and things like that. But I feel like it's more disrespectful for me to participate rather than to um just kind of stay third party, help out when they need help,
Mm-hmm.
and then help so things like that.
Yeah.
What you've said, but I want to hear it on camera. How do you go about talking with somebody who, in a sense, is in limbo? Trying to
Yeah.
see what their plans are for the future.
Yeah. You know what? I think number one, things like this aren't talked about very much, and so it's something that people need to talk more about. The fact that there is a creator that made everything. I was just recently online, and I was looking for evidence of a worldwide flood, and they tell there's I guess you go to worldatlas.com, but I mean, you can go anywhere and you can find, it's pretty well proven that on every continent of the world there was a flood. And isn't it interesting that the scriptures clearly talks about a worldwide flood and how it happened? And so I think that when we talk about science and we talk about what's recorded in scripture, it lines up, and the Bible is supported by science. And so I think that there was a time in my life where I was in limbo too, and I had to actually go back. I think I was in my early 20s, and I was brought up in a Christian home all my life, but I had to actually go back and ask myself, is there really a personal God, a God that would, help me, the Holy Spirit walking alongside with me, the Parakletos, which is the way it's described in the New Testament, walking right alongside me. And but can I really believe that? So I had to kind of do a reset and really check what I was taught and if I really believe it. So it's a big subject, and I would just encourage everyone that there is a creator, and that he actually, can you think of any time anywhere that God actually had his hand in a nation, that he led the nation of Israel by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, as they exited Egypt to go to the promised land, which, by the way, was prophesied hundreds of years earlier to Abraham. So can you think of any other nation that had such a personal communication with God? So
Hmm.
I think there's just a whole lot of evidence that you can have confidence in what the scriptures say.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Huh. So, um, one of the things I was hoping we could do back and forth is, comparing science to
sure,
Christianity.
right.
What you bring up the worldwide flood. What's pretty interesting is, and it's not science based, but a lot of cultures have stories of a worldwide flood. The Navajo
Right.
culture has a story where we escaped a flooding world. So does Christianity. Um, I can't think of any, but one thing I've noticed, as far as a lot of reading, I've seen a lot of stories or some correlations between Christianity and some things that are science based, and some things between just different cultures. A lot of their stories are still the same. So like with I know we talked about this a while back. It was like excuse me if I get the story wrong, but something. So in the Navajo culture, and it kind of depends on who you talk to. The story can be a little different, but um, in one story, the son came down and impregnated First Lady, and then she had her twins, and her twins were monster slayers. Um, Even in like Greek mythology, there's a story of like Zeus coming down and impregnating a woman, or he impregnated a lot of people actually. And then with Christianity, or I don't know if it's Christianity in particular, but how does it go with Virgin Mary? Um,
Yeah, that Mary was just found to be with child, and she was betrothed to Joseph, who was a righteous man. And when he found that she was actually pregnant, he was ready to divorce her, and he was told then, not to do it because what was in Mary was what was of the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit actually came upon Mary, and and that's how she, had the Christ child.
mhm.
And so, yeah, so what I find interesting, though, that maybe differentiates Christianity a little bit from what you're mentioning, where, the sun or Greek mythology and the things that happened there, was that the coming of the Messiah was actually prophesied hundreds of years before it happened. So
Mhm.
it's not just a story of the Holy Spirit coming upon Mary and she becomes pregnant.
Mhm.
It's also really a story that goes back hundreds of years where prophets actually foretold that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem,
Hmm.
uh, that he would be born of a virgin,
Yeah.
that he would be rejected by his own people, that there would be a forerunner, Elijah, or actually John the Baptist,
No.
telling that he would be coming, that he would be called a king, that he'd be spat upon, that he would be pierced,
Yeah.
that he'd be given vinegar on the when he was crucified, which is exactly what happened. But it was also prophesied that not one bone would be broken. And guess what? Not one of his bones was broken. And that was common during the Roman era. If you had people on the cross and you needed them to die quickly, you would break their bones,
Mhm.
their leg bone, and that
Huh.
would kill them. And that also it was prophesied. And these are all prophecies if you ever want to go to learnreligions.com. Okay. That's one place you'll find
Yeah.
47 different messianic prophecies about Jesus and the fact that he was fulfilling prophecy when he was
Gotcha.
born.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Okay. Um.
But it is interesting. I mean, there are, I think, some certain similarities when we talk about other religions and getting back to the flood. I was looking in some of the other tribes. The Cree tribe talks about a raven was sent out to check for land during the flood.
Mhm.
Well, that's exactly what happened in the Genesis account, that a raven was sent out. The raven could not find any dry land, so it came back to the ark.
Uh-huh.
And and then a dove was finally sent out, and a dove did find a resting place. And then we know then that Noah and his family were able to get off the ark at that point.
All right.
So, and then the Ottawa tribe is another tribe that talks about the raven being sent during the flood.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what about like, 'cause I guess when I was in high school, one of the things that conflicted me was well, I want to say it wasn't a big deal, but how I think in the Christianity creation story, it's like the God created light on the third day, or
I think it was the first day, first or second day he created light. Maybe it was the third. I better reread that.
gotcha. So I think the reason why I had conflicts with it was because like I questioned if he created light on this certain day, like how did he know what was considered a day the first 1 and 2 days? You know what I mean? So like if there was so the sun typically is the measurement of time. Time's a construct. Um, if the sun was created on this certain day and that correlates or that constitutes one day, how did he measure the first 2 days? And then another one that was the Bible describes Earth as an island, and so when we interpret an island, it's typically flat. But science tells us that Earth is a sphere. So these were a couple of things that
Okay,
I
let
used
me
to use.
stop you right there. You
Yeah.
said that the scriptural account says that the earth was flat. Is that what I heard you say?
It describes or it describes the land as an island. So typically,
I'd have to disagree with that. I really, having read the account, I don't really find that where the Bible describes that particular
oh yeah,
phenomenon.
so yeah, that's why I brought it up. I wanted to
Yeah.
hear your point of view about it,
Yeah.
and what you have to say, and then just come a little closer to the mic if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it talks about in Genesis that that at first there was just waters and darkness, and then God started to separate the he started to separate things, the land from the water, and he did create light. Maybe it was the third day. I apologize, but he started to create specific land masses and separate them from the waters. But actually, there was just darkness and water at the very beginning, right?
Yeah. So, how do you feel about science and their influence on modern life? In particular, I was actually listening to a podcast today, and it talked about the advances we're doing, the advances we have in technology. So, like for example, have you heard of? I think it's called in vitro fertilization,
Sure. Yeah.
where they take the sperm of a man and the egg of a woman, and they is fertilized the right word?
Yeah, they get it fertilized in a tube, in a laboratory
And then they
tube.
reinsert the fertilized egg into the woman's uterus so that she's
Yeah.
capable of having children.
Yes.
Do you think like to a certain degree, like that's just like scratching the surface
Yeah.
to what some people call playing God?
Yes.
How do you feel about sciences such as in vitro fertilization?
Yeah. You can always take things that God created and make magnificent things out of them. I mean, just look at the skyscrapers in New York City or anywhere. You can take material out of the ground and make almost anything you want. So it would be no stretch to think that you could take something that's living and do some things with it, cloning or whatever you would want to do, and you can have some results that appear like you're maybe creating something, but I'm not so sure that you're really creating anything. Are we really creating something, or are we just maybe changing a little bit what's already been there?
Yeah. So, have you heard of CRISPR? I think it's called like the CRISPR project or something in general, but
Tell
typically,
me about it.
so CRISPR is this idea. No, no, not the idea. It happened in China. There was a Chinese man who. No, no, no. Gosh, what was it? Yeah, I'm gonna say that. So what he was doing is he was basically, no, 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 the CRISPR babies. That's the topic. CRISPR babies.
Okay.
And CRISPR typically is genetic mutation or genetic editing. Genetic editing.
Okay.
And so the story about the CRISPR babies is this man from China who took the who took the I think they were babies, and he actually manipulated their genome. They were born from a person who had HIV, I believe, and their genome was manipulated so that they're more resistant to HIV. So that,
Mm.
and he thought he was doing a righteous thing, and by definition, or by yeah, I guess by definition, it sounds like a good thing. He was doing the he actually he's I think he's in prison right now for human testing, but he manipulated their genome so that they're more resistant to HIV, and so far, they from what I read in the article just now, I heard on the podcast, then I read about it. From what I read in the article, there was nothing wrong with the twin girls up to the time. And then there was another patient, but he was in prison for like human testing, uh, and his idea was long term we can actually mutate other babies' genomes so that they are more resistant to not just diseases like HIV. It could be other viruses such as like West Nile, uh, cancerous um, diseases, and so forth. So he wanted to do this so that babies were just more resistant to these things, and we could actually what's the word? Make humans almost immune to these things. Um,
But I wonder, with all of the mutations that take place and all of the cloning, and of course, cloning can be not so good, and you can get animals cloned that are not as healthy as they should be. And not to say that in the future we will not, perhaps we'll do a better job with that. But um, uh, I kind of lost my train of thought, but we're still on it. Oh, here's what I was going to say that, you know, even though you have all these mutations, you still end up with a fly or a bird or a fish. I mean, you don't really see you don't see the kind changing. It's still going to be a bird. It's still going to be a lizard or a fly. You're not going to see it change into a different, you're not going to see a reptile become a bird. And I know they have a fossil out that purportedly shows the cross between a reptile and a bird, but you really don't see the change in kind. You see slight differences in the species, but not in the kind. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because we've done a lot of study with mutations, and we don't really see things changing very dramatically.
No.
And so I think that gives the evolutionists a hard time figuring that one out. But I was reading also where they found an upright tree that goes through different sedimentary layers. Okay, and really and truly, all the fossils that you find. I mean, if I'm taking what you're saying about evolution and mutations, and I'm going back to a creator and the evidence of creation. But it just seems to me that there's just so much evidence of fossils everywhere in the world, and that we need to maybe give some real credence to the fact that there was a worldwide flood, or that there was a creator. But I think I digressed. You were really talking about mutations. Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess it's more towards the advances of genetic mutation or genetic editing, and this idea of playing God. Um, and so I think it's the Chinese government that's looking into um, enhancing their not enhancing promote more like promoting masculine men. And so there's this idea that we could actually well, not we, they, people are going to genetically mutate or genetically edit their babies in the future to the point where they're picking and choosing. I mean, obviously, I want to say obviously, if there is a chance that your baby could suffer from cancer that's hereditary or certain things, people are going to edit those things out. And then they're also going to do things where they're more maybe even like higher levels of testosterone, or just so that they're more athletic. That's the point I'm getting to, is that they're going to be way more athletic, almost like super beings. And then having like certain things so like they can be really smart, you know what I mean? So like they're going to do these superhumans basically, and pulling out the random card that your child is would be born with these birth defects. You know, so to a point, do you think like at that point that's some sort of playing God? Because for me, I actually am a believer in evolution.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so I feel like we've in my opinion, humans have evolved so far to this point, and now I feel like um humans are taking uh Darwin's theory of evolution into their own hands, and they're evolving people. They're evolving animals. Like in that sense, in my sense, that's how they're playing God, is that they're taking evolution into their own hands and applying it to these things. Because so far into the future, we're gonna have these superhumans who are super athletic with a high level of intelligence, or something like that.
Yeah. I remember when my son, he was going to a public school and at the beginning, and we switched him to a private school and then ultimately back to the public school. But we were talking about evolution, and he was only about maybe 6 years old. And he said, well, Dad, but given enough time, these things can happen. And so I know he was parroting, what he had actually heard in the school. He was very intellectual. And the bad thing about being intellectual when you're a young child is you get bullied. And that was the bad side of his being so intellectual. But um, I really don't see a problem with, I think humans are always going to see what they can do. They're going to take things to the boundary line and then beyond. And I do have a problem when they use stem cells from aborted children, and they take those stem cells to do their research. And I know even the COVID-19 vaccinations, some of the companies, have done some of the work that needs to be done to create the vaccination using stem cells from, um, from aborted fetuses. So it's a real issue. And I think there are moral guidelines that we have to follow if man is going to try to play God. I don't think he's going to do it as well as God. I don't think he's going to really be as successful as maybe he thinks. I'd like to think, really and truly, when we talk about these things, your mind just can imagine all kinds of advances. But, really, what about the cure for, people that are angry and bitter and getting sick and killing each other and countries at war with each other? I mean, what is the solution there? To me, that's the bigger issue. And that's something that I think Christianity really addresses, is the fact that there is salvation. And it's like when Jesus was walking the earth, he didn't have an easy time of it. He was on the earth for 3 years, giving his ministry, repent, and for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And he wanted all of his disciples and everybody to enter to the kingdom of God. But he met all kinds of opposition, and some people left him. They didn't stay with him. And then he was talking to Peter, one of his main disciples, and he said, "You're not going to leave me too, are you?" And then Peter replied, "But where else can we go for so great a salvation?" Okay? So in other words, Peter realized that there was salvation from this world to a better world through the Messiah Jesus, who like I mentioned earlier, did fulfill the prophets, did fulfill the writings of the prophets. Mm-hmm. And if you read in the scriptures, I don't want to be too long-winded here, but I did want to say, if you read the scriptures, that's the way God communicated with his people, through the prophets. And it says in Amos, the book of Amos, that God didn't do anything except he did it through his prophets. And everything that was done through his prophets. And that's in the book of Amos. But then I think it's in the New Testament, it talks about the fact that in the latter days, God is working through his son, Jesus, who, as you know, was crucified. Okay. Yeah. And so when we think about crucifixion and then, we think about, well, how does that help me with my guilt or my sin? Or, how does that give me assurance of a better life after I die? And there's such great answers to that. And I think that human condition, the human condition of sin and selfishness and hurting each other, is really kind of trumps the smaller issues really of how far can we go with science. What do you
Gotcha.
think? I said a lot there, but I got I got some follow-ups to that. So depends what if you want to follow that line or not.
No, I encourage you to keep, to finish those thoughts.
Sure.
Um, I think, well, when it comes to like the idea of, so so just to clarify, you're actually in favor of what humans could possibly do as far as maybe genetic editing. Uh,
I
would
don't
you?
know if I'm in favor of it. I really don't know enough about it to be sure. I am very much against abortion and the fact that they are using
Oh yeah,
human fetuses
gotcha.
for scientific research,
Yeah, I
and that
think
really is happening, and I'm very much against that.
yeah, I think that's the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, right?
That's what I've been told.
Yeah,
Yes.
the Johnson and Johnson vaccine is.
And I think there's others too. I've actually heard that Moderna and Pfizer, I hope I said that right? I hear they're a little bit further removed from actually using stem cells from the fetuses.
Mhm.
I don't know the details on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
too sure about well much of the vaccines, but yeah, I did hear that about the Johnson and Johnson is that they're
Yeah.
using aborted fetuses.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
And the Catholic channel that I occasionally watch did mention that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think well, you didn't say you were in favor for it, but you did acknowledge that humans typically would take, in your sense, God's creations and find a way to advance them, right? And that was your not idea of humans trying to play God, but just kind of taking advantage of the capabilities bestowed upon them.
Yeah,
Is that how I'm
right.
understanding?
Hey, if you go back historically, the Tower of Babel, and it was a giant structure from what it sounds like in the account of Genesis,
Mm-hmm.
and God was not pleased that because God said to mankind to spread out and replenish the earth.
Uh-huh.
Okay, He didn't want, and so what He did as punishment because they were all kind of hanging around the Tower of Babel. I guess I don't know how many people, but that was an historical thing that happened in Genesis. So he confounded the languages so that all of a sudden we have all these different languages. And but getting back to what you're saying, I think they will. I think man is prone to just go as far as he can and then some. And I'm not really supporting it. I'm not really. I'm just saying it seems to be a fact.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Gotcha. If I had to choose a side, right now I'm. Oh, where'd the audio go? I'm against it. I think it's kind of wrong to genetically mutate and going on this idea of perfecting, the perfect child, disease-free, a stronger, resistance to viruses it sounds good. It sounds great for your child to not have these things, but just the idea of genetic editing just sounds wrong, especially towards enhancing their athletic ability and their mental capacity. My son, he was born with a spina bifida. My son was born with spina bifida, and going through, to like the ultrasound and kind of getting that call back saying that, your child, well, not your child, but like we had to go in for a consultation, and we get there and we're sitting with this we talked to an ultrasound tech, and then we talked to um, a neurologist, and he talked to us about how our child had spina bifida, and my wife found out about, I think, after her first ultrasound. I think they noticed it pretty early, and there was a good sized bubble on his back, and when he was still in his mom's belly,
Wow.
and we had to listen to the doctor tell us all these, really negative things, and it just it felt like it kept getting worse. Um, I really dreaded her, monthly checkups, because every time we went, it would just seem like it was just getting like worse and worse news. They told us like, your baby's gonna have this. Your baby could be born with this. Could be born with this. This problem and this problem, this problem, and um, and actually this kind of relates to why I lean more towards traditional values. During this time, my family, when they heard, when we told them that, our son, our first son was going to be born with this birth defect, my family, they went and had every ceremony they possibly could, like, and then they brought me along, and out of respect, I participated. And at this point, it was no longer about me and my selfishness. When I was in high school, when I was, young and naive, I felt like I knew everything. So it was easy for me to, disrespect people who had Christian beliefs. It was easy for me to, kind of denounce my family's traditional values. But now I'm involving my son, who has this. I felt like I needed to believe in something.
Sure.
Like I needed help from somewhere. So
Right.
I participated in, um, my family. They went to the end and back as far as these traditional, medicines. And my son, you know he was actually born. He was born with a pretty good sized bubble on his back, and he went into surgery 3 days after. And one of the things they told us about spina bifida was that his legs would more than likely never work, or even if they could, they would be, club footed, or just things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily when he was born, actually, um, they told us that his legs wouldn't be able to move. But I remember, like, I would do this like little kind of like that to his mom's belly. Like I would just kind of like, and it would scare him when he was in the belly, and he would kick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he would kick. And so when we were just kind of sad about how and we were ready to adjust our entire life around our son's, um, capabilities. Like, we were ready for it. And there were days where me and my wife, we were just kind of sad. But it was just seeing that little kick when I would scare him in his mom's belly. It was kind of like in my idea, words of encouragement from him. Like,
Yes.
his legs were mobile, his legs were moving, and so when he was born, his legs were kicking away.
Oh, they were kicking.
Yeah, they were kicking away, and
Yeah.
so he went to surgery 3 days later, and luckily, like, the surgery went great, and he has a pretty good scar on his back, but um, our neurosurgeon, neurologist, they talked to us about, these things can always come back, so just be aware.
Yes.
And so even then, like, I was thinking on the way home when I was driving back today, like, if I could have, would I allow doctors to remove that spina bifida, or like, if it's genetic, if it happens to be, because there's studies that show that spina bifida might be genetic. Even with our second child, they encouraged my wife to take, um, folic acid pills before, if we could, if the baby wasn't a surprise, to take it prior to her getting pregnant. Really, because there's a correlation between a lack of folic acid and spina bifida in babies. So, um, looking back at it now, like, could I allow them to edit or manipulate the genome of my child?
Right.
The idea is scary. The cause seems right to me, but you see, even then, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could get behind,
Yeah.
genetic editing, even if it's for the good of a fetus or a child.
Yeah, because you were given a very grim prognosis of your child. I mean, it was not good news, and but yet you allowed I'm so glad to hear you didn't think it probably never even entered your mind to abort the child.
No.
And but yet today, I think that's what happens a lot. If a family gets a report that their child won't be normal, then they do consider, and they are even advised, from what I understand, to abort at times. And I think caring for the most vulnerable in our society, whether it's the aged or the very young or the unborn, I think that's something we should be doing.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, though, you have a good story to tell there, because everything worked out. In over at birth, there was that bubble you said, but tell me the rest of that. So that it got better, and he's okay now.
Yeah, so he, I remember my wife was crying, after she had just given birth, and she was holding him and seeing his little legs kick and things like that. I remember her laying there saying, I'm never gonna tell him to sit still. We hear parents all the time telling their kids to sit down, things like that, and just holding him, and his legs were kicking, and he was crying, and she was laying there crying, and she was like, I'm never gonna tell him to sit still. She wanted to. Now he doesn't sit still. Yeah, now he's ridiculously naughty.
I mean,
Uh,
that bubble disappeared, or
so
was
with the surgery, the our neurosurgeon, he um basically pops the bubble,
yeah.
and then he pushes the meninges back into the spinal cord, because
Oh,
spina bifida is basically an opening in the spinal cord at
okay.
I think it occurs at 2 to 3 weeks
Okay.
of conception, after conception.
Oh,
So it's really, really early, and to a certain point, it's almost impossible to kind of beat it, So you find out you're pregnant till after 4 weeks, typically because like they're missing their period. But spina bifida occurs. The spinal cord is developed within the first, I think it's 2 to 3 weeks, and then so what happens is this, because the spinal cord, it starts out flat, the meninges are in there, and then over development, the spinal cord begins to wrap up and go around cover the meninges that connect to the brain. And what happened with my son is, towards the very end, he had myelomeningocele, or oh gosh, I can't remember the correct name. I don't even know if that's the correct name, but basically, that towards the very end of his spinal cord, it didn't close properly. So through development, his spinal fluid leaked out of his spinal cord, and that's what created that bubble. And then the meninges began to poke out of the spinal, that hole in the spinal cord. So yeah, the doctor just kind of popped the bubble. I don't know if he popped the bubble, but he cut it open, pushed the meninges back in, he closed it back up, and so
and so
yeah.
he's okay today. I mean, I've seen him. I see him a lot, and he was one of my students, and he seems to be just fine. You know, very active and very healthy. So that's a good story.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, and then like you said, like the doctors advise, they didn't advise abortion to us. They did mention it. They said it was one option to consider.
Is that right? Wow.
And we never considered it from the moment they told us, like what he could be confined to. We started thinking about how to adjust our lives to it. And then, after we told the doctor like abortion's not an option, um, that's when they started uh kind of leading us in certain directions of, like, okay, here's how you could adjust your life. Buy this, look for one of these to put inside your home. I feel like that's when they really started advising. So those are the kind of things we had to talk about with doctors.
Wow. The scripture says, when you compare, when you have to make a choice, the scripture says, choose life. Okay. So that's really the basis to a large degree behind this whole right to life, anti-abortion movement is we want life to be chosen over death. We don't want the culture of death to prevail or the culture of convenience. We want to take care of and show love.
Yeah.
Right.
Moving towards politics, I typically I didn't care about abortion when I was before I even before my child, even during my child, like it was something I didn't um have too much of a care for, really only because like I already knew like I wouldn't, I personally wouldn't abort a child, but I typically didn't care if anybody else did. And then when I started getting into more into politics, I figured I had to choose a side. And if I'm going to choose a side, I'm going to be anti-abortion. And it just seems wrong to take a life.
Yeah.
In my opinion, abortion is murder.
Sure.
And that's how I see it. And I think people who say it's not murder, I don't want to speak for them, but
Sure.
The only conclusion I can come to is people who say it's not murder. I don't know if they've, it's one thing to see a child in your partner's belly, not see the child, but see your partner with child is one of the, it's probably the most beautiful thing I've seen. Just seeing, my wife hold my kid.
It is beautiful. Let me interject this real quick, because I know there's so many women out there that have had abortions and actually regret it. And they really didn't understand that what was inside them was so precious and full of life and so beautiful, as you described. And for those women, we just have to know that we made a mistake. We ask God to forgive us, and everything can be okay between us and our Creator. And And there are a lot of decisions. That's why I don't always call it murder. Sometimes I think there's just a lot of ignorance that's surrounded by decisions to abort a child.
Uh-huh.
I think if you're doing it and you know there's a living child in there and you're aware of all the facts and you have all kinds of light shed on that subject and you still choose to go forward with an abortion, maybe then I would use that term,
Mhm.
because I'm sure in a lot of cases it is murder.
Oh yeah. So, have you heard the argument that pro-lifers is it pro-lifer? Yeah, pro-lifers cannot debunk. Have you heard? It's this story of, it's one of those stories of like it's impossible that it will happen. But if I remember correctly, typically it goes if you're in a um gosh, what's it called? The like the clinics where they do things such as in vitro fertilization,
Yes.
and let's say the building's on fire, and you're going down the hallway to the exit, and then down you come to a four-way in the hallway, and then in one end of the hallway you have thousands of fertilized eggs, in a cryo chamber, and then on the other end of the hallway you have a 4-year-old child who's crying, and so there's a fire, and you can only save one. Do you save the one child, or you save the thousands of child? If life truly begins at conception, if true life truly begins at conception, do you save the thousands and thousands of fertilized eggs or the one child? And so you can't save both.
Uh-huh.
And so, have you heard that argument?
It seems like I might have. I don't recall it though, actually, so maybe I haven't. But that's a real hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
And how would you answer that? I don't know. I don't know that you could win or lose an argument based upon a choice there.
So, technically speaking, we have the answer today. If the woman's life is in danger giving birth, um, they save the mom, they save the woman. They'll save the woman before they save the child. So, like, in a sense, the answer is already answered today because consciously speaking, you're gonna save the child. Um, and that's
Yeah, it
what,
seems logical. Yeah.
yeah, that's so. To go back to it, like the question is answered today with modern medicine, even in Catholic, I think things like Catholic, what do they call it? Like the clinics that,
The pregnancy centers or
yeah. So even places like that, excuse me, their laws are to save the woman first. If her life is in danger, they're gonna save the mother before they save the child.
Mhm.
And in that sense, where they can only save one, they're gonna save the mother.
Right.
Same thing's happening here. Are we gonna save the child? Or we're gonna save the person who's already here versus the the embryos? Then we're
Yeah.
gonna save the child first.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but there's also ways you can flip it. I don't remember. I heard this like a long time ago, back when I was, I don't know, first like reading about politics. But
Mhm.
it's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah. 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 So, I was getting back to, we've been kind of touching on science a little bit, um, and recently now we're talking about abortion and how terrible that is. And I just want to reiterate, if I can, because I just feel the hurt right now, even as I talk to you, in my soul. I feel the hurt of perhaps millions of women that have had abortions, and you may have done it. You may have done it not knowing. You may have been told a lie that it's just a massive tissue in there, or maybe you weren't told anything at all, and you were young and you didn't know. We have a God that has actually sent His Son, Jesus, the Son of God. And I remember, the Scripture says when John the Baptist, who I guess was related to Jesus, I think he was the cousin, but when he saw Jesus, he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world."
Yeah.
So, we as humans, we're so imperfect. We're going to make mistakes, and we're going to hurt not only ourselves but other people. And I just want to encourage everyone, whether it's something that you did that you feel really bad about, or whether it's just wanting to have a right relationship with God. You can do it just simply by believing in Jesus. And that is all you have to do. You have to believe in Jesus. And, God says in the scriptures that if you don't believe the Son in the Son of God, you make me out to be a liar. You make God out to be a liar. And so we need to accept his Son. And what did he do? He died on a cross. Okay, he was crucified on a cross. Now, we know that in ancient societies, a common way to get forgiveness or to appease the gods would be to slay an animal. And this was, an ancient practice. Even in ancient Israel, they would slay a goat or a bull to get a proper atonement for sin. And see, that's why when Jesus came, and by the way, he was, as the prophets foretold, he came and he gave up his life. That's why John the Baptist said, "Behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world." He freely gave himself up to be crucified so that we don't have to slay animals anymore. We don't have to do those kind of things to have a right relationship with God. We simply have to believe the message of God concerning his Son, Jesus.
Gotcha.
So it's so I interject that because we're talking about a very delicate subject when we talk about abortion, and and neither of us are pointing the finger at people. We're just saying it is a terrible thing, but hopefully all of you know that there's hope too, even if it happened to you.
Yeah. People are gonna hate this. Why are two men talking about abortion?
Oh, it's a big issue nowadays. And when we talk about politics, I mean, it's a huge issue. And now that we have 3 appointees by Trump to maybe sway the court opinion on abortion, maybe Roe v. Wade will be overturned. We'll have to see how that works out.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Politics are fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty charged atmosphere nowadays.
Oh yeah. I think politics are kind of frowned upon, especially in the workplace, but I always find like little ways to sneak it in.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I tell you what, I did a good job with my son. I totally got him immersed in my way of thinking. And but if you're watching, I just want to say that's a good thing, son. You got some light, but it's a huge thing because so much of politics now just isn't whether you're Democrat or Republican. It's involving science and what are we going to do with morality and marriage. How do we define marriage? And so it's just a huge subject that has so many ramifications, more than it ever did before, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny because like politics kind of became politics kind of became almost like pop culture. Pop culture and politics used to be very separate. You knew about music, you knew about movies or things like that, but now politics has kind of taken over pop culture. It's this point where you can't avoid politics.
Yeah.
Even if you claim to not care about politics, you still hear about it. You still subconsciously take it in, and it's because it's sprinkled everywhere. It's in music everywhere now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's kind of irritating is, especially with like Gen Z or not even Gen Z, millennials are a big part of cancel culture, and not only is pop culture and politics mixing together, but it's I feel like one product of these two mixing together is cancel culture.
Yeah.
And what's sad, it's not even sad to a point. It's like more like pathetic to me is this cancel culture, like the fact that certain things could offend somebody so much that they want it removed from movies. Like,
see, that's why I think it's so wonderful what you're doing here, and you interview a lot of people, and you're not censoring them, but you want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
You want an honest dialogue, and that's a beautiful thing. Hopefully this is something, hopefully, you're like a light, to the world. Hey, we can have an intelligent discussion here. We don't have to throw rocks or shoot guns to get our point across.
Gotcha. What's the thing you asked me before we started rolling about?
Oh yeah, I asked if you are a seeker of truth.
Oh well, not that one. Well, like I said, I'm more of a seeker of information. I just love absorbing information. The one about if I would have a certain kind of guest.
Oh yeah, I ask you, would you have on your show a terrorist, maybe a jihad, fully ready to do the unthinkable? Would you have them on your show?
So that kind of terrorist. Well, I think yeah. And then I wouldn't mind airing it. I think the only problem why I wouldn't do it is, um, for like uh, terms and conditions reasoning. So if they were to say something extreme,
Hmm.
if they were to say something extreme, YouTube would definitely ban it based off of the dialogue they use.
Yeah.
But if to the point, and I do create I do plan on creating my own website eventually, so I would definitely would post all of the uncut, unedited footage there because I do encourage. Oh man, I do encourage individuals to speak, unedited, uncensored.
Hmm.
I want to hear what you have to say, even if it's some extreme thing. Like it's what we're not getting nowadays is raw footage. We're
Yeah.
getting edited to push a narrative, and what I want to do is I just, like you said, I want to sit down and discuss with
Yeah.
people who just want to be heard, whether
Yes.
they want to be heard or I feel like they have um, something. Oh, sorry, we have a little technical difficulty here. But yeah, so uncensored, basically uncensoring people and what they have to say.
Well, wasn't it Trump that went to North Korea and talked to the leader there? Uh, and there was a general policy that we would not talk to terrorist regimes or evil countries, but
Yeah.
but he did. And I think there's a place for honest dialogue, even when you disagree, even when the person is really really a bad person.
So, what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought.
But we have to. I support you, on that idea of let's talk to as many people as we can.
Yeah.
Let's not be so quick to censor. And if they are saying things that are objectionable, I think one thing I told you earlier was you can disagree with them. You can disagree with them, and you can let them know that they're wrong. Sometimes people just need to be told that what they're doing is wrong. And it's just like, as a teacher, and I think of these kids, sometimes they, in being juveniles, adolescents, they do stupid things, and they just need to be told by an adult that what you're doing is wrong. You shouldn't do that. Your job really is to, be a student, or if you're talking to an adult, your job is, because adults make big mistakes too, and adults can be said, you can be told, look, you need to be that husband, you need to be the wife that you should be. You need to take care of your children like you should. How's that going? And so there is absolutely, and I hope you adopt this actually, where you will, because I know you're young and you're just kind of getting started in this whole endeavor to interview people, I should say, have discussions with people. And I hope you feel free to give your slant and your viewpoint.
Oh yeah, definitely. I like to let them talk, but I think, yeah, like um, my idea is just to encourage other people to get their voices heard in, and if I do happen to give my opinion on certain things, I might release some other little videos here and there. But um, yeah, I think what is holding me a little back typically is one big part is actually the censoring. I know like YouTube does a lot of censoring for things that don't fit their narrative because they typically are, left leaning on a lot of things. And what I have to say most likely won't be left leaning.
Well, it's even other countries, I think in Norway and Russia and, I was reading maybe Germany. Yeah, Germany. They took issue with what was being done by Twitter to censor and to get Trump off of Twitter. And, that's a dangerous precedent that's been set by Twitter, denying the freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is one of the huge issues in our country right now is freedom of speech. And don't we, I mean, and I've heard the argument, well, these tech, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that they're private, therefore they have a right to decide who the audience will be.
Yeah.
And my answer to that would be, I tell my students when they go into a school, their free speech doesn't stop there. I don't say free speech. I say their rights don't stop. They don't, they still have a right to walk the halls without being hurt or, bullied or whatever.
Yeah.
And freedom of speech, that's one of our amendment rights in the Constitution. And so why would that be taken away just because you're on a social media platform?
I think from what I read, a lot of it has to do with they only ban you or censor you if your content puts individuals' lives at risk.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they do, and or if they're what's the word? Like if it's threatening.
Yeah.
If it hurts, basically.
Yeah.
But going back to censoring, so like they told Republicans, or they told people, like, if you want free speech, go make an app that has free speech. But they actually did make a couple. There were some I don't remember, there was a Gab. Have you heard of the app Gab?
No.
Yeah, there's an app that mimicked Twitter and its capabilities, called Gab. And there was a lot of people who are on the right that actually went towards Gab. They left Twitter, they went to Gab.
Okay.
But companies like Google and Apple, which tend to be left-leaning, they actually took Gab off of their store, so you couldn't download it.
How about that?
Yeah. So the idea, you're telling people you signed the terms and conditions when signing up to a thing like Twitter, and then when you get banned because of this, if you want free speech, go make an app. They went and made an app, and then that got censored because the top distributing or app distributors said they don't want this content. So
Wow. See that? I'll tell you what. I was at this is right along the area of free speech. There is a mentality out there among left-wing, liberal, everything in between, that says, I don't want to hear what you're going to say. And if you're going to say it, then you better leave. And that actually happened to me in the Flagstaff Mall.
Oh,
I was
wow.
in a store with my wife, and I was, starting up a conversation. There weren't many customers, and I was asking him how it was going, and we got a nice little conversation going. And then somehow we got onto President Bush, and ultimately we ended up on the subject of abortion. And we all did this. It wasn't long, all within 2 or 3 minutes. As soon as I started talking about, that we need to protect life, words to that effect, he told me to leave.
Oh,
He
wow.
told me to leave, and he said, by the way, take your partner with you, which was my wife. She was there patiently waiting for me.
Gotcha.
So
Wow.
there is that mentality out that, hey, we don't need to discuss this anymore,
Yeah.
And this just happened maybe 4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, like that again. That's the main reason why I started this. Is I genuinely want to hear other people's point of view, and you and I don't. I want to say we don't get along, but we don't see eye to eye when it comes to faith-based thoughts. So,
Sure.
but I still encourage you to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And being on the reservation and with as strong of a faith that you have, you just forewarning, this is probably not going to get a lot of
Not a favorable response. Huh?
no, yeah, probably not. But
you know what? That's an interesting subject because I do, the scripture tells us as Christians to be light and salt. So I try to share because, and like there's a story about a man who finds a treasure in a field.
Yeah.
So he does the logical thing. It's a parable in the scriptures. And what does he do? He sells everything that he has so that he can buy that field. Why? So he can have the treasure, right?
yeah,
He wants the treasure in the field. Well, I have a treasure, and it's something that my Father has promised me, and so I want to share it.
Gotcha.
And I'll tell you what, I honestly, and I am very aware that and I've been told this twice, probably in the last month. I'm in Indian country, okay? That's exactly the way it was phrased by two different individuals.
Yeah.
And I never had anybody tell me that. I guess they're finally getting tired of me talking too much, maybe. I don't know. But, but I'll tell you what, those two are very small compared to the reaffirmation by maybe, I don't know, dozens of I shouldn't say dozens, I don't know how many, but there's been a lot of people that have really been supportive of everything that I say.
Hmm.
And there is a sizable Christian, there are a lot of adherents to the Christian faith in the Navajo Nation.
Oh yeah,
I would
definitely.
imagine it would be maybe 20% or more.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. There's a lot of like clash between traditional natives and the traditional beliefs versus natives with Christian beliefs. There's actually a lot of, I want to say, spite. I think, is that the right word? Spite. There's a lot of
Could
salt
be.
between them.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I really want to dive into with natives who are heavily Christian based. And I want to hear, what led them to that direction.
Oh yeah, that'd be
So
so interesting.
yeah. And then one person I want to speak with is not one person, but one individual I'd like to talk to is a Native American or a Navajo who's um, heavily traditional. And the hard part about that is there's certain things we can and can't talk about, and there's certain things that Navajos or natives in general like to keep within their little bubble. I wouldn't call them secrets, but they're sacred, and
Hmm.
so it's gonna be a little hard to dance around, things like that. But
Yeah.
so
Do the, and I know I've asked you this before, uh, the traditional native belief, okay, the traditional Navajo that really believes, you know,
uh-huh.
their faith, uh, do they believe in a God? I mean, and I guess, there are so many faiths that say that they have a God or gods that
Uh-huh.
they believe in. Um, and, but, well, we'll just take it at face value. Does the traditional Navajo belief have in its tenets of its faith the idea that there is really a God that created everything?
Hmm. I'm probably not the best spokesperson, but
Okay.
with the best of my knowledge, to my understanding, we don't necessarily believe in a God. There isn't, a God or the God. To Navajos, it's Di and Dene. So Dian is holy and Dene is people. It's plural. So when you put Di and Dene together, it's the holy people. So when we pray to the holy people, and then in that prayer, we say we acknowledge everything around us. We acknowledge, the sky, the earth, and just nature in general. Like for example, if we're going to like a place like Flagstaff from here, you know how we cross that bridge by Cameron. Um, Heavy traditional natives, like my family, when they cross that bridge, they actually pray, and in that prayer, they acknowledge everything around them, and um, they ask them for kind of like in what you would understand as their blessing. So crossing the river below them, they're asking, for protection. The land before them is asking for protection, and then the sky above them is guidance. So in a sense, it's not that we pray to a supreme being. We more along the lines pray to Navajos consider everything sacred. Everything is holy. So that's why there's this idea that we should respect everything around us, respect the land, to the animals, to structures. So
Yeah, and when we compare that to Christianity, we look at creation, and the scripture clearly says that this is the handiwork of God.
mhm.
So we as Christians, and we are all, and Adam was told to keep the garden, which in the Hebrew means to protect the garden.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we are to protect the environment, and but we look at creation as evidence of a creator, whereas I think as you described, it's a little different for the Navajos.
Yeah.
For the Navajo, I should say the traditional Navajo, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why I had not like I didn't find it as conflicts, but one thing that didn't make sense to me is, Christianity believes in the supreme being, or supreme a divine entity, which is God. We pray to God, and then Christianity says we can't, or any other God is a false God, right?
Well, it says you should have no other gods before me.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, and
Yeah.
then if we mix that with the traditional teachings, it's we pray to everything, and everything is sacred. So I feel like those things don't mesh. I don't know. I'm not, like I said, I'm not one to speak on either topic, like Native Americans who believe in, things like NAC, Native American Church. But that's just one kind of like one thing I've noticed is those two concepts don't make sense. The one says one and only, the other says everything is sacred.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, along this line, I'm not going to sit over here and say you're wrong, okay? Because that's not my job, okay? My job is to shed light on what I've found, the treasure that's in my heart, you know? And so I'm not going to say you're wrong. I will say this, and I think you might even agree with this to a certain degree. In the scripture, and I think it's in the book of Romans, but and I think it's the Apostle Paul that says that, basically, Gentiles, and of course, if you're not a Jewish person, you're considered a Gentile. Okay, that's the term there. They've created their own law. Okay, so you create your own law in their heart. They've created their own law. So in other words, they've become a law to themselves. In other words, if you believe that it's wrong to go over the speed limit, but you do it anyway, then really you're guilty. If you're telling everyone, to show love, but yet you get home and kick your dog or whatever, I mean, then all of a sudden all the things that you say are truthful and right, but yet you contradict that, then you are not living up to your own law. And I think really, and I can only speculate to a certain degree, but I think when we stand before our Creator, that we're going to be looked at for, did we believe our own law? Okay. Right.
You're right. I do genuinely agree with that. It's like, and that's really why I have trouble like 100% committing to one side. Is I don't know, like I don't drink, I don't smoke, I feel like I don't do anything crazy. I don't think I'm a crazy person. I don't think
you never inhaled, huh?
Well,
just kidding. That used to get a few politicians in trouble.
No, I do have a funny story of like eating a couple of weed cookies unknowingly, but so I feel like I don't do anything crazy, but I still feel like I'm not in this sense worthy of saying I'm 100% traditional. I believe in traditional values because I can't. I'm not sure what I have to practice correctly, and I'm not sure if I'm going to practice it correctly. It's just these things like it's on part of it. Most of it's on my fault is because I didn't pay attention. I didn't pay enough attention to my family. Like I said, during this time where I could have been learning the stuff. I was young and naive. I felt like I knew everything.
Yeah.
But I know like one concept is like if I remember correctly, the husband and wife are supposed to sleep in different beds. With Navajo tradition.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and so it's even that I don't do that. So I can't say I'm traditional when I go home and I lay down next to my partner and right now our newborn.
Yeah.
Like his crib. But going back to like what you asked if I ever inhaled anything. I was working construction with my best friend and his family, and one time. So we had two breaks. Our first break was at 10. Our second break was like at 1 or something. But after our first lunch, we went to the store. We came back and we were eating on the job site. And one of the guys I work with, he threw me some cookies. And he's like, "Hey, dude, you want a cookie?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take a cookie." We just got back from first break. Of course I'm gonna have a cookie.
Yeah.
So about 10 a.m., I'm snacking on this cookie. And then he's like, "Hey, dude, you want another one?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take another one." So he gave me a second one.
Oh, that could be loaded with that, THC or whatever. That could have been really loaded. Yeah.
So I'm eating the second cookie, and I'm like, "This is some pretty good cookies." Yeah. he throws me a third one. He's cracking. He's dying. He's laughing away. And he's like, "Bro, flip it." So I look at the back of the cookie, and the back of the cookie says THC.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, "Dude, what the hell, man?" This is not something.
Was it at work, did you say?
Yeah, it was on the job site. So and it's like, keep in mind, like I'm standing like on like the third or fourth floor or whatever, and I'm throwing drywall out the building. I'm looking down like off the balcony. I'm trying to aim for that trash. Oh, so the first 10, 20 minutes, like I didn't feel anything. 30 minutes, 45 minutes go by, I didn't feel anything. So after an hour, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm safe. Must have not been very potent. And then 2 hour, like by noon, and this is during the summer. It was actually when I was working at the school, so I needed some summer work. Um, about noon hits, and I start getting like not dizzy, but everything is like wobbly.
Oh, how about
Yeah.
that?
And
Yeah.
so I have to like close one eye to do things, and I'm standing over the balcony, and I'm like, oh my god, just kind of everything's moving and whatnot. I'm working with one eye closed, and I'm throwing the stuff off, and after I tell like my best friend, like, yo, like it kicked in. Everybody's dying, everybody's having a field day with it. He was like, oh, we got him high, but um, I go to our foreman at the time, our supervisor. I'm like, hey man, and it's like I said, it's during summer, so it's really hot and it's in Page, and so Page can get triple digits, no doubt. But um, I go to a supervisor. I'm like, hey, I think I'm dehydrated. Like I'm not gonna tell him that I'm high. I was like, hey, I think I'm dehydrated. I need to go take a break. And he's like, all right, make sure you drink some water. Just go back to the hotel, take a nap, sleep it off. Make sure you call, check. Just kind of worried. So I was like, all right, yeah. So I
For
go.
you viewers at home, we advise you not to do this at work.
Yeah. Don't give the new guy weed cookies.
Yeah. It
Um,
could be dangerous, actually.
it was a funny prank, but so like at noon, noon rolls around and I'm back in my car. I take a nap. I think it's a nap. I just put the seat back and I go to sleep, and uh like I hear this knock on the window, and it's my best friend, and he's like, hey dude, let's go home. I was like, what do you mean go home, or go back to the hotel? I said, what do you mean go back to the hotel? And he's like, dude, it's like 6 o'clock. So I slept for 6 hours in my
Oh,
car.
oh my.
um
Well, did you keep the job?
yeah, I kept the
Yeah.
job.
Okay.
Yeah,
Your
I needed
boss
work.
didn't really
Oh, he
get
never
too
found out.
upset.
He
Okay.
probably know now.
Yeah.
It's what's really cool is I actually got paid for the full day too. So
Okay.
yeah, my paycheck wasn't smaller. Like I noticed, like I got the full hours for that day, and
I guess the moral of the story is check the ingredient list, right?
yeah, don't just eat cookies after your first break.
Yeah. How about that? That's interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel
So,
that.
when we talk about things that we do that are wrong, now yours was kind of done out of innocence, but, we do things sometimes knowingly. I think, real quick, I tend to go over the speed limit a little bit. Now, do you happen to know, can you give me some advice on how to make sure that I don't, my dad used to go over the speed limit and he would say, well, I'm just keeping the spirit of the law. So as long as he, was within the spirit of the law, he was okay.
Uh-huh.
I just haven't. And so I kind of feel like if I'm just going 5 miles over, it's okay,
Oh yeah,
but because anybody can slip that little bit, right?
yeah.
But when I start going 10 miles over, then I'm starting to question, what am I really doing? I think we all struggle with little, where's the line between right and wrong and being guilty or not guilty, right?
Yeah, see, like
Yeah.
even that, I think that's why I enjoy our conversations, because you're one of the genuine Christians that I know. Is you're actually you follow probably the straightest path that I've seen, of these Christians that I've known.
Hmm.
And so for me, I can't tell you how to stay close to the speed limit because I have a lead foot. Oh man,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm so good at my commute to work. Like I know where the highway patrol, the sheriffs, I know where they park. So I'm like, oh, I'm safe. So I'll take off, and I'm a speed demon. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm the last person you want advice from about driving.
I remember I was about ready. I had applied for the Postal Service because I did work 12 years as a mail carrier. And so right before, I had taken the test, I had scored close to 100%. And so I knew I was going to be hired within 6 months, but it didn't turn out so good because I got 3 speeding tickets in 1 year.
Wow.
And it was rush into work every day to a job I didn't like. And so I ended up having to wait a certain period of time till 1 or 2 of them got off my record.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
so it kind of bit me big time, So
Yeah.
we kind of sometimes we pay for our little indiscretions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know that way too. All too well. One time when I was actually just before my son was born, I got my very first ticket, and I didn't have a license. I was driving without a license. We were actually driving to back down into the valley. We're driving from where we lived in Shanto. We had a apartment in Buckeye. We were visiting family, and we're driving back down to Buckeye because with spina bifida, our child had to be induced. They didn't want a surprise, you know. They wanted to be fully ready. They had everything prepped, especially for our neurosurgeon. Our neurologist wanted to be there, so we had a scheduled delivery date, and we're like, oh, we're getting induced tomorrow. So we were hanging out with family for like kind of like one last time, and then we were driving back, and I ended up getting my first ticket. I was speeding. I wasn't paying attention. Like
Yeah.
my wife had fallen asleep, and
Yeah.
I was driving, and I just seen the old red and blue right by in my rear view. I was like, oh shucks. So I pull over and I end up getting this ticket, and I should have took care of it like as soon as I could, but I was just being the procrastinator that I am, and I ended up forgetting about it, and it went back and bit me in the butt. So I paid like 3 times what I should have paid the first time.
Yeah. Procrastination. That's something that could be a topic in and of itself. I mean, procrastination, they say, why do we procrastinate? Why do we? I mean, obviously you procrastinated and just didn't address it right away. You waited a period of months, right? Or something.
Yeah. Well, so like, I mean, in my defense, I was having a baby.
Yeah.
My wife was having a
that's
baby.
a good excuse.
We were so preoccupied with the new guy. It was my first kid. Like,
Yeah.
we couldn't, take our eyes off. Just brand new parents.
Yeah.
After 3, 4 so months, I ended up forgetting about it, and once I got that like warrant, I remembered very quickly. Oh, I better take care of this. So yeah.
Yeah. How about that? Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about a warrant, or the police officer does strike a certain amount of fear in us, to a certain degree, a healthy fear. It's
definitely.
respect or fear, whatever you want to call it.
I think it's this idea of security, and then when you're on the opposite end of security, when you know you're at fault, that's when those feelings come in.
Yeah.
How do you feel living on the reservation for almost 10 years, huh?
Yeah, it's since October of 2013, so
8 years.
It's close to 8 years.
So how do you feel as far as like the Navajo Nation Police Department, or like the protection, or not, I want to say the job that they have to do living here so long? How do you feel about our?
You mean you're not talking about the local security, you're talking about the actual police, right?
Yeah, the Navajo Nation Police.
It's I haven't really encountered them too often, so I can't really comment on on their performance.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
Wow. 8 years and you haven't needed them?
I haven't needed them. No. That's so interesting too, because when I first came here, I had never been on the reservation, period, and I was like, I didn't know if it was safe or not, and I came here. My wife still wonders how in the world I found this place, because I got here around midnight when I first
Really?
arrived. And I was here by myself. My wife wanted to work another year at her job. So the first year I was here by myself.
Wow.
And I remember how I was very concerned. I would not only lock the door, I would put some chairs next to the door just to keep it secure.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know. And now I've found out how really safe it is. And I feel blessed to have lived here all these years in security.
I think, well, Shanto's actually kind of going off the deep. I want to say going off the deep end, but like things are getting a little crazy in Shanto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's actually a couple people that are starting to start. It's a really small, really small community, so I could name them. I'm not going to, but like some actions are starting to stir up, especially what I've seen after I graduated, and after my time in Diné College, or Diné College and things like that. Coming back home after living in Buckeye, I've noticed things are different. The culture is a little different. The environment seems
Really?
a little different. Yeah.
What do you think that the elements that seem to be very dangerous going forward? What is that? Is that like a drug thing, or what is it? Yeah.
Part of it's drugs. Part of it's gangs. Your typical I don't want to say problems, The typical difficulties you find with any community that has a lack of resources. So typically, that's what
Yeah.
it, that's what it comes down from, is the lack of resources that the community provides.
Yeah.
Even though we're a really really small community, I think there should at least be a community gym,
Yeah.
or like at least maybe make the park nicer, make the parks here bigger.
Yeah.
There needs to be some sort of extracurricular activity that the community, not just our students here, but the community needs to get involved in. And there's a lack of that when you mix the lack of I guess you could say infrastructure, the lack of care for the environment, or for like extracurricular activities that these kids can do, and you mix that with the wide open area that surrounds Shanto, and you're gonna get bored.
Yeah.
Your mind's gonna wander, and as a young adult or as a young teen, you're gonna do dumb things.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think I partly think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I think that's where we have to think about, having resources for them, like you said, a gym. I know we've had the open gym, but it's
Oh
been
yeah,
just once or twice a week at the most, and
yeah,
certainly not available now. So, right away when I think of kids and free time and boredom, and there are a lot of things they can get into that they shouldn't get into, and then we have to talk about what is the supervision.
yeah,
What's really happening in the home? Are they getting guidance?
Oh,
And
yeah.
are they getting a moral upbringing?
Mhm. So typically, oh man, I wish I had these statistics. The single parent household on the reservation is ridiculous. It's outrageously high.
Yeah.
And I believe that's a lot of that's what it comes down to, is the fact that there, in a lot of homes, typically there's no male figure. Even if there's a male figure, most times it's like what I grew up with. I grew up with my older brother and my uncles. I didn't have a father figure. Well, I
Mhm.
mean, like my uncle was my father figure, but a father speaking, I didn't have that, and that's way too common on the reservation.
Yeah.
Um,
That's unfortunate. Across America, actually, that's becoming a big problem,
no,
not
definitely,
just on the reservation, but maybe it is more acute here.
yeah. A lot of the problems here on the reservation are folded, like they're folded as like things like domestic violence, single motherhood rate, drug abuse, obesity, um, things like that. Every problem that's a disease to the United to the U.S. is going to be folded here.
When you say folded here,
Like
what do you mean?
tenfold, like it's multiplied.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
multiplied.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
It's way
believe it.
worse here.
Yeah,
Um, but I attribute a lot of that to socialism. But that's a whole
socialism.
other can of worms. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So socialism is adopted heavily on the reservation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
wouldn't contribute like 90% of it, like of our problems, because a lot of that's accountability, self accountability, and a moral upbringing. I think that's what it is. But I do think socialism does play a key role in the mentality and the culture that surrounds the Navajo
I
Nation.
think so. I think, if I can say so, and by the way, I've been blessed to be part of this community, okay? And I can't say enough good things. I mean, we can all pick up bad things anywhere that we go, um, but what were you saying just now?
Socialism.
Socialism. Sometimes I think that people on the Navajo reservation really haven't bought into this. I guess you could almost call it the white man's agenda.
That's what natives would call it. Yeah,
Yeah,
white man's agenda.
and I think that is a certain degree reason for why maybe things sometimes don't get done that could get done, because they're not really buying into it. And honestly, and I hope I don't get too much flack for saying this, but maybe if the Navajo Nation really was more autonomous and really more separate, and with maybe not so much infusion of funds from Uncle Sam, maybe that would be better. I think it would hurt in the short term, but maybe the long term it would be better.
Yeah. So I've always had this. Well, to start off with, typically speaking, so socialism is I want to say the foundation. It's the idea that is heavily supported on the Navajo Nation. And but the Navajo Nation also claims to be a sovereign nation. So in a sense, we've taken certain sovereign aspects and we've only taken the ones that that would actually benefit us. Like
Yeah.
we have our own government, we have our own police force, we have our own this and that. But when it comes to the idea that we could never truly be sovereign if we still hold on to these socialized ideas.
Right.
Like for example, free healthcare. Um, I'm against free healthcare, but I know that if we were to take that away from the Navajo Nation, our Navajo Nation would implode. It would implode almost instantly. It would terrorize our elderly and our young generation the most. And realistically, it's because we don't know how to live in a society where we don't have a safety net. Everywhere outside the reservation, there's no safety net. Living in Buckeye for the time that I did, and losing my access. I had access when I lived on the reservation, and I'm no longer on access. And so after all that, um,
I'm not really following you there.
so
Did you want to
access
explain that or?
access is
Yeah.
the free healthcare
Oh,
basically
sure. Yeah.
that a lot of natives are under, and in my opinion, it's the safety net.
Yeah.
Uh, Natives aren't afraid to live life on the edge, and by on the edge, I mean I'm talking like drinking heavily,
Uh-huh.
um, a lot of domestic violence. Like the natives know that they're gonna get cared for. That they're always gonna have this safety net. That's what I keep going back to.
Okay.
And if we take that safety net away, if we take it away too fast,
Yeah, it would be hurtful.
it would
Yeah.
be hurtful. If I had a magic wand, I would remove the safety net for situations that involve alcohol.
Yes.
So if you drink to a point where you need to get your stomach pumped, you're gonna go to the hospital. They're gonna help you because it's the law. And then when you wake up and they send you out the door, you're gonna get a $10,000 bill because of all the equipment they had to use on you.
Right.
But
right.
if you need insulin for your diabetes, or if you catch pneumonia and
Yeah.
they need to hospitalize you,
Yeah.
or any kind of or bacteria disease you cannot control,
Yeah.
I have no problem with the Navajo Nation receiving assistance and funding for that, because those are things we cannot control.
Yes.
Things we can control is our own actions, such as
Right.
drinking,
Right.
overdosing on pills, falling asleep at the wheel, causing a car accident,
Yeah.
and putting other people in danger. So like if we remove all those and remove that safety net, people who tend to drink to the point where they need their stomach pumped, they're not going to do that. Even if they do, they're going to think twice about it before they drink to a point where there's almost no going back.
Yes. That's not a bad thing, maybe for our people in government to consider. That
Yeah.
there would be some kind of penalty in place for, just like, my goodness, if you drive a car and you run over somebody's mailbox, you gotta replace the mailbox. So there seems to be some real justification for making people pay when it's their fault. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually what I was leading to before with when I was asking you about how you feel about our Navajo Nation police. It's really not our police's fault. Like they're just doing their job is just to enforce the law.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to like our judicial branch and the penalties that come with breaking the law, I feel like our penalties need to be more severe.
Sure.
And some people believe that kind of thinking is toxic, that there should be this cruel punishment. I want to say cruel punishment, but a heavy penalty, a heavy fine, a heavy punishment for these certain acts. But my thought is like if you really can't control yourself that much, maybe you need to be punished that bad. So like for example, domestic violence, like if typically they're gonna get a slap on the wrist from our courthouse and maybe like a $200 fine, maybe not even that.
Yeah, that's and I think to a large degree our judges live in bubbles, and the elite powers that make the laws, and I'm talking about the people that are the next level up or two levels up, the judges and our legislatures and the people that really make a lot of money, and they're allowing for laws to be put in place that are not punitive, and it's really unfortunate. There used to be this Old Testament, well, it's in the Old Testament where it talks about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. If somebody plucks out your eye, then you can take their eye and take it out. And that sounds like terrible, absolutely despicable to even think that you would do the same thing that had happened to you. But actually, that creates compassion, because now the person who who tore somebody's eye out, now it's done to them. Now they know how the original victim feels.
Yeah.
And so it creates some real. And so I would say in your case, if there is really a punitive effect, that it would create a better understanding of the crime.
So I think it's not necessarily, in my opinion, like the better understanding of the crime. It's more for preventative measures.
Yeah.
If you're going to hit your wife and you're only going to get like a slap on the wrist and,
Yeah.
and a couple bucks, then you have almost no incentive to not do it again because you're a shitty person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if our judges would slap a $5,000 fine for hitting your wife, for domestic violence, for hitting your kids,
Yeah.
then I don't know if those people would think twice about it, or if I don't know if it would stop them from doing it again, but it would definitely make them think twice about it.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just can't change a person, but if you're gonna walk out with a bigger bill, like, that's what I'm saying. It's more for preventative measures.
Well, this whole you've heard of Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And they're outraged mothers that have gotten together to try to put legislation into effect so that these people do suffer the consequences if they have an accident just based upon their carelessness or irresponsibility. So, you're talking about a big issue there. Yeah.
And it's weird because it's not something that's always brought up with our nomination presidents. It's something I feel like they should address. Is we've had these laws kind of the same for so many years. Even though I've only been more understanding laws recently, I feel like I haven't seen much of a change growing up to the laws that were set then compared to now. So basically, to put into perspective, we're using the same software that is in our judicial branch, our judicial system, from when I was a kid, and maybe even before I was a kid, before I was born. We're using that same software and that same mentality to help regulate people's lives today. If you were to use that same analogy for like technology, we're using outdated software on new methods now. Like, it's obviously not going to work. So I feel like our judicial branch needs a heavy reboot, maybe not even just our executive branch. Every branch we have on the nomination needs a reboot.
Yeah. I mean, one day I was just looking at the salaries of the judges, and some of them just work part-time, and they make, if I remember correctly, they make a lot of money. If I recall, it was in the six figures, to be a part-time judge. Now, this was in one particular county. I believe it was in Ohio. But they're reimbursed. And so, I think there's a kind of a dichotomy here between, for an example, you and I, we work hard. We don't have a lot of money or necessarily high prestige at this point in our existence anyway. But we're the worker bees, that's what I like to think. And, like if you were just put a camera around this place, you'd see the kitchen, and, you'd see some pretty modest, things, everything here is not real expensive. And, but see, that's not the case for other people, the other levels of society, they live very nicely. And, it's even recorded in scripture where the rich do oppress the poor. And I sometimes unknowingly, but I think that the people in power, the people that have the money, a lot of times they allow just mayhem and chaos to be ruling the day. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. So before we end this, one thing I did want to ask you, and it's completely unrelated to a lot of stuff we talked about today. It's something I saw on Facebook actually today. It cracked me up. Have you heard about universal basic income? Basic universal income. Universal basic income.
I probably haven't heard of it that way. No.
Okay, so
explain it. Yeah.
It's this idea that regardless of your occupation, regardless of your well, I'm pretty sure it has to do with your upper class, your class structure. But it's this idea that everybody would be paid a universal basic income, whether it be biweekly or monthly, but we'd be getting some sort of salary. And yeah, to not go into too many details about it, that's the gist of it. Universal basic income, whether it be biweekly, weekly, or monthly salary, everybody gets it. Everybody over 18, maybe a small incentive, like I don't know, $200-300 per kid or something. How do you feel about that?
So everybody would get the same income, essentially.
Yeah, so if you had a job, you'd still get like, oh, we'll draw the line at $1,000 every 2 weeks. Every week, $1,000 every week. Everybody gets a check. You have people who are the working class, or everybody who like works at like a cashier at McDonald's to um, a welder.
I would say I got to cut you short on that. I think that's a terrible idea. I would not want that to happen.
So I saw it today. Like, there's people that actually, Andrew Yang, who was a candidate for the Democratic Party, he wanted to push for universal basic income, and even those who are unemployed would still get this, this weekly salary. So why do you think why do you oppose it? What's your take on it?
Yeah, because some jobs, and now I know there's a lot of problems, like with some people getting a lot of money for not really doing much, and that, Studs Terkel wrote a book, Working, and this came out, I think, in the 70s, and he talks about, the different kind of jobs that people work at, and some people really hate their job, but they're stuck in jobs they don't like.
Yeah.
But I mean, when we look at the workforce out there, it's so complex and so many different levels of expertise. And some people are working harder than others. And some people, their skills are more valuable than others. So why would you want to make that all the same? I think it's just doesn't make any sense.
Gotcha.
Just,
in my opinion, first off, I opposed it really because when you pay everybody $1,000, regardless of if they're working or if they're not working, and it's not like they're being paid the same. Like, you would get your paycheck from McDonald's at whatever hourly rate you're getting paid, and then on top of that, you're getting your $1,000 check, right? So it's not necessarily paying everybody the same. It's just they're getting a baseline salary. And my first thought of opposing that is it encourages complacency. Why would I work if I know I'm going to get $1,000 at the end of the week? Why would I work if I know I'm going to get money? And it's going to be enough to pay for this and that, and so that's my first thought. But then the counter argument that I heard, the counter argument that I read about it, was that now it gives value to the worker rather than taking value away from individuals and encouraging complacency. It actually gives value to workers because it would teach big businesses like companies like maybe Walmart or Target, where they can just filter through new employees on a weekly basis. You know what I mean? Because people are always applying and they're not afraid to fire people. So if you're not afraid to fire people, you have no problem treating your employees like crap. So if we implemented a universal basic income, companies would have to take better care of their employees because because now the fear is on them, the fear of losing workers. It would be hard to keep consistent, steady workers because they know that regardless if they have this job or not, they're gonna get money elsewhere. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I still oppose it because, again, like, it seems like it's gonna do more harm than good. What it just seems like is you're just trying to take it out on big businesses. Like, those same laws are gonna apply to small businesses. The same theory is going to apply to small businesses. They're gonna have a hard time, keeping employees, and it's not just going to be because we're treating them like crap. It's ultimately going to encourage complacency. Again, like, why would I have to work if I know I'm going to get money? And I think that's my biggest.
I think it would encourage complacency because one of the things that spurred me on to do better was my actually going back to my college days, and I would have to work during the summer, and I helped bricklayers. I helped at Kings Island as a security officer. I helped at a moving company, having to lift pianos upstairs, up flights of steps, and a heavy business furniture and stuff, and it was hard, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to, you know, stay at that level, you know.
Yeah.
And so it really encouraged me to buckle down and do my college work because I didn't want to stay doing the summer employment.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, there has to be something, there has to be an incentive.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think you know that I worked two jobs. Well, I when I worked at the school, I worked two jobs, and
I knew you worked at the school. What was the other job?
Walmart.
Oh, okay. For a
Yes.
while it was two. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. For about like almost 2 years, I think it was two jobs.
Oh, it was two. I didn't know it was that long. You
Oh
had
yeah,
to.
it was a
Okay.
while. It was a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the left actually puts down the idea of working two jobs, whereas like the right not encourages working two jobs, but encourages the grind. Some people call it the grind. The left kind of demonizes it because they believe that nobody should have to work two jobs to feed their family.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand. But, you remember my weekly routine. It was 7 a.m. to 4 was the school, from 4 to 6 was coaching, and then I could lose an
I don't know
hour.
how you did it. Yeah, it was at the school, and then you coach, and then you had to run to Walmart.
Yeah.
Oh, that was crazy.
But like it kind of benefited me because I would lose an hour because of daylight savings time from 6 to 6.
Okay.
So I could leave here at 6, get there at 6.
Okay.
Yeah. and then coming home I'd lose an hour though. Yeah. But I mean,
Well,
like,
you were young. I mean, when you're young, you can get away with it. I don't think I could get away with that. That was really ambitious on your part, though.
yeah. So I think the biggest incentive there was just seeing my son happy when we would travel, and like both places were really good at giving me time off. With the school, you know what you're in for. You're gonna get weekends off. You're gonna get this and that.
Yeah.
Walmart was really good at taking care of like my schedule. So when I did accumulate enough money, or like when I would grind long enough, I guess you could say, the biggest reward, and that was my biggest incentive, was seeing my son happy,
Yes.
doing certain things, taking
Yeah.
him to places.
I remember a conversation we had along that line that you did want to be able to provide
Yeah.
nice things.
Yeah, and I'm jealous of my son, man. I never saw the ocean until I was like 13 in 8th grade,
Yeah.
and my son's gone there. He's like 6 now, so he's gone there I think maybe 4 years. It was
Yeah.
like obviously we didn't go because of the pandemic, and then we probably didn't go when he was like first born. So he's gone to like the ocean. He's played in the ocean so many times. He's gone to places like Vegas, and he's done a ridiculously amount of traveling.
Wow.
Yeah, so like
That's neat.
and then that again, that's the incentive. It was just to see my son do these things, and be happy in that sense.
Oh, yeah. Provide opportunity too.
Yeah.
Is something you can provide with extra income.
This actually just popped in my mind. I forgot. Have you heard about who's the author? Have you heard about that book, White Fragility?
No.
Yeah. There's a book out. It was a award-winning book called White Fragility. Something about the idea of the book was that it covered why white people were so afraid to talk about racism, and it's a ridiculous book. I haven't read about it. I've seen reviews, and I do plan to read it. I want to read it just because to see what all the fuss is about. But from what I've read, it's like a ridiculously like racist book, and it's written by a white woman.
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't fully understand when the riots were going on for months and months during the summer. George Floyd, that was a terrible tragedy, but then it became much more, and they just were attacking police and innocent people.
Yeah.
And buildings being destroyed, and young businesses, small family businesses being destroyed, and and they still refer to those as social justice demonstrations or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I got on. How did I get on that one?
White Fragility.
Oh yeah. So I would see all these white people. They were as bad as any of them. In the riots, and and I knew, there was like a rat in the pudding somewhere. It wasn't adding up why I saw so many white people. But as the riots wore on, I realized it wasn't just about race. It was about their idea of what our country should look like in the future, and they wanted to destroy. Um, they wanted to destroy the system. They wanted to defund the police. They wanted a different system. And when you look at the cities that were destroyed, you see Marxist symbols, as graffiti that was left by many of these rioters. So there was definitely an agenda that went a little bit beyond race. But yeah, race is and racism. It's really that. Maybe someday we'll have to do one on that. That's really a big topic.
Yeah.
That's a big topic. Are white people? Do you think white people are afraid to talk about race?
Mm, no. So like, no, I don't think they're afraid to talk about racism or they're afraid to talk about, whatever white privilege they allegedly have. I think it's the idea from the narrator, from the author, that she perceives it as they're afraid to talk about race because in her mind it's like they're dancing around the topic when they bring up statistics and facts, and a lot of statistics actually don't point to this idea that whites are superior.
Right.
But definitely we should we definitely should have dove in on that. That would have been a funny.
Yeah, I don't see how anybody could make an intelligent argument in favor of white, the Caucasian race being somehow superior. I think that's ridiculous. We're all created in God's image, and in my worldview, it all came with Adam and Eve. And of course, Adam was created by God, but then Eve was created by a bone being taken out of the rib of Adam. And of course, in my estimate, this isn't a scriptural precept that I can prove, but when we think of a bone, it's usually a lighter color than the soil, right? So Adam was created from the soil, maybe a little darker. Eve was taken from the bone of Adam, maybe a little lighter. And there you get all the races from there.
Gotcha.
So,
That's
yeah. Theology according to David Lynch. Right?
all right. Well, Mr. Lynch, I really appreciate you having. We're actually going on a little over 2 hours, but I guess we can end it here. Do you have anything you want to promote, or last couple words to say before we end the video?
Yeah, thank you. All I want to say is, that there's hope in this world, okay, and that hope is in the Son of God, and that you can actually take hold of that hope. It does say that if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So there is like a salvation element there. You can be saved from this earth, because when we think about it, after this earth is over, after this world is over, after our life is over, where do we go? What happens?
Yeah.
It's probably good to know about as much as you can now, and so there is hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you for letting me say that.
No problem. Yeah, like I said, when I was starting this, it's all about promotion. I want people to promote their voice and what promotes their individuality. And you've heard me say that I have really nothing against Christianity. Some people do need that. Some people do need that self reassurance that the life they're living it's okay. So yeah. I'm glad you had to add that back. Yeah. Add that in the end.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Till next time.
Sure.
Till next time. Thanks again, Mr. Lynch.
Sure.